This is Economic Review. My name is Simba Elijah Charles Kiage. You're watching Metropole Television, and thank you very much for keeping us company all the way from 7 a.m. up to now. Let's get into those biggest economic headlines that you're waking up to this morning. And we do expect to be joined by Odhiambo Ramogi. Odhiambo Ramogi is actually here. Good morning, sir. How are you doing?
I'm great. Good morning, Simba.
Happy to see you. It's a good morning. We also expect to be joined by George Menga shortly as we continue with this conversation. Let's pick where we left then. Thursday last week, so the Kenya Power Board kicked out of Parliament after a stormy meeting with the National Assembly's Energy Committee. Now, the committee had summoned the board over diverse issues affecting the power distributor. Some of the board members did not appear for the summon, a factor that angered the members of Parliament who accused the board of being or of failing to show seriousness in their jobs and showing disregard to the oversight role of the committee in the energy sector. A heated exchange followed between the Kenya Power Board chairperson Vivienne Yeda and some sections of the members of Parliament, after which the committee chairman David Gikaria adjourned the meeting. Now, the board was expected to give a brief on key issues affecting Kenya Power's financial performance, as well as reported infighting between the board and management and dealings between the company and independent producers, that is the IPPs. Now, the chairperson Yeda fought back and refuted the claims that the board was not taking its job seriously. I will leave her quote out because we have her this morning. So I'm just going to continue with the rest of that conversation on exactly what ensued. Now, the members of Parliament, yes, were unsettled by the statement, terming some of the words disrespectful. Let's jump into that exchange, and then after that come back and look at the performance of that company, and then start asking the right questions this morning.
Yeah, we respect you very much, but you cannot say that.
Just be on your side,
no.
Chair.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Although we are supposed to use parliamentary language, I agree. But they are underway that you're supposed to push them. Because if you look at the minute and the attendance register of the board, during the time, Chair, that they were pushing the CEO, Bernard, to resign at a duress, they were usually full house. But when it comes to the invitation of a committee that has equal powers of High Court, they cannot take this seriously.
We are not here to please the board. We are elected members, and we have 5 years contract with Kenyans. Our work is to oversight and to see what this board is doing. To be honest with you, as we sit here, this board is so powerful to an extent they're interfering with AACC investigations. So we either do our work as members of Parliament or we resign.
As has been said elsewhere, we as individual board members have responsibilities and are persons of certain integrity in society. So the fact that we can actually accept to take on the position and serve at KPLC is a testimony to our commitment, our conviction that KPLC is an important company that this nation requires. So we don't need to be lectured about that. We are very much aware.
Point of order, Chair.
Chair.
Point of order,
Point of order,
Chair.
Chair.
What we
Point
have
of
been
order.
telling you.
We
are not lecturing.
Point of order,
That is
Chair.
our work, Chair.
Point of order, Chair.
Okay, so
Point of order, Chair.
Can you
Point of order,
fail
Chair.
your
Point of order, Chair.
I'll give direction. I'll give direction.
Point of order, Chair.
I'll give direction.
Normally, we can talk about it now.
I'll give direction. Madam, I want you
Chair,
to
we can
withdraw.
tell you what he does.
Sure.
I want
Chairman,
you to
This is the
withdraw.
kind of
Order
attitude that
members.
is running Kenya
Order.
Power.
This is the problem in the whole book.
That is the problem.
Point of
This
order.
is the problem in the whole
members.
book.
You resign.
I want you to-
Nobody's lecturing her.
We will even tell
Nobody's
you.
lecturing her.
We will need now to have a way, and sooner the better. So I want to adjourn this meeting. I will be doing the last invitation to the board, and every director must be present in person physically.
That's it. Oof. That nobody is lecturing the chairperson, that is Vivienne. That's fine. She says that they understand the importance of Kenya Power. So let's look at where Kenya Power has been in terms of that performance led by this particular board. If you look at where we are in terms of the net change in income, as of 2017, it was already dropping at negative 38.1. And then 2018, you can actually see negative 92%. And then in 2020, we're talking about negative 459.2% jump. I mean, a difference of more than 360% in terms of the net income change. Let's cross over to the next data point this morning as regards Kenya Power, and you will see the net income trend. That 2020 is the one that is on a negative 939 million, almost a billion. All right, let's cross over to the next one as well in terms of understanding how they have been, and that's exactly what we are presenting for you there. Look at where their EBIT stands and then compare that with that loss for the year. Let's leave it there. Odhiambo Ramogi, let's begin from the conduct of Vivienne. She said that all the board members, even the ones who were absent from that summoned by the Energy Committee in the National House, knew their mandate to the latter. And so they were not there to get lectured. But then they did not make a quorum once they were summoned to the National House. Do you feel that the Energy Committee overreacted to her response, or they were just justified to do so?
This is an interesting conversation to have. I don't think the board at KPLC know what their mandate is.
Yes.
If they knew what their mandate is, would have seen some significant movement by now. I don't think if they take their mandate seriously. They may know, yes, you may know what you're supposed to do, but it is also possible you don't know how to do it.
Yes.
Or it's also possible not to be serious about doing it. And I think the latter is true. Yeah, there have been calls for them to resign from the staff members. They're uncomfortable with the board as it is.
Yes.
I think they have noticed that the company is going down, their jobs are on the line, and the board is not taking that seriously. The other day also, KEPSA has come out and said, look, this is not serious anymore. This is not funny anymore. And they want the board to take its position seriously. The point is, KPLC is going under while the board is watching, and I think they need to take responsibility for that. But on the other hand, also, I think Parliament also needs to be serious while summoning some of these people, because ordinarily there is a lot that goes on in the background, so that the respect is lost by the time they come to the foreground.
Yes.
Those engagements of, we can destroy your career if you don't play ball, quote unquote. Perhaps those envelopes, legislative envelopes, need to reach MPs in time. And so if that was discussed behind the scenes, then you find that the disrespect is overt, and it's clear that these guys are frustrated by the members, not
Yes.
necessarily because the members are doing their duties, but because of other reasons. So yeah, I think both parties take responsibility for the encounter, but more keenly, the board needs to be serious with their duties.
Yes, just as I welcome George to the conversation this morning, Odhiambo Ramogi, there is something that has become synonymous with Kenya Power. Chances are that they don't have a CEO, they just have a standing CEO. If you applied for that job, Odhiambo Ramogi, and took it, I give you 3 years, and you shall either be fired or quit by yourself. What has made Kenya Power a career killer, if I may lack the better words to describe it this morning?
No, I think there are no better words to describe it. I think it is a career killer. And I wanted to tell you before you called it a career killer, dude, I am not applying for Kenya Power.
You should apply for Kenya Power job. Why not? You seem to understand where the problem is.
I have my own set of issues, and I think I am on top of them. I don't want a new set of issues. The problem with Kenya Power is you're right in the middle between interests. On the one hand, you have the interests of the public, the interests of staff, the interest of of shareholders.
Yes.
And then there are very powerful people that have very strong interests in Kenya Power. And so on an ordinary day, running a company like this, you put forward a vision. The vision is supposed to bring together these interests into one language, one corporate language, which is, this is where we want to go. The client is happy with where you want to go. The staff is happy with where you want, and the shareholder, because these people have different interests. The client wants good service, the staff wants good salary and career development. The shareholder is not interested in any of the two. He's interested in his profits and dividends. And management, of course, is interested in growth. And so the vision has a way of combining all these interests into one language, one point of destination. But now when you bring in political interests of people that are powerful, more powerful than the CEO, and that are threatening you in one way or another, and forcing you to sign on the dot for unsustainable rates with independent power producers, forcing you to sign on the dot that bills should not be paid, bills that ought to be paid by these people, bills that ought to be paid. And then it becomes very difficult then for you to do your duties as you should. And so, yes, I agree with you that it is a career killer. And anybody who goes to Kenya Power really needs to pray, and pray very hard.
Pretty much. Let me introduce George to the conversation this morning. George, good morning, sir. Let me throw you right within it. Let me begin from where I've just left it with Odhiambo Ramogi. There's a statistic coming up that top private executives go to Kenya Power. It's either they get fired or they voluntarily quit. And I posed the same question to Odhiambo Ramogi this morning. Told him, well, if you would apply for that Kenya Power job, I'll give you 3 years. It's either you're fired or you've already quit. George, what has made this company a career killer?
Elijah, there is something we call political capture,
yes,
or state capture, so to speak.
Yes.
That is what is bedeviling Kenya Power. And that is not unique only to Kenya Power. The same is happening to KPC. The same is happening to Kenya Airways. The same is happening to East African Portland Cement, albeit at below the table. I'm not surprised that Kenya Power is going through what they're going through now, given the history that they've had for some years now. Remember, Elijah, Kenya Power is a monopoly, and it's operating in a market where it has monopoly in distribution of a very critical resource in the economy, and that is energy. And that begs the question, why is such a company struggling in a market like ours? And it boils down to corporate governance. And that is why I was not surprised when the board was called and they were not able to explain their figures, so to speak, and they had to be kicked out from the parliamentary committee meeting. So I think, Elijah, this is a company that is likely to go under, or it is what I can call it. If you look at the previous year's auditor's report, Auditor General's report, it's an insolvent company, Elijah. It's a very sorry state of affairs for such a huge company. And it begs the question: what next for Kenya Power, Elijah?
Yes.
I think if Kenya Power was to survive, then we might go the direction where we took Telecom Kenya in, where we privatize it completely and bring in a strategic investor to take over the assets of this corporate and run with it. Otherwise, the way it is, the biggest challenge that Kenya Power has now is corporate governance. As simple as that, nothing else. The market is there, Elijah. There is infrastructure. Everything is there for them. The only thing that is lacking is corporate governance, and that is influenced by the political capture of this conglomerate. So if it is to survive, then this company must be privatized, and must be privatized professionally, so that we get in private investors come in and inject fresh thinking or fresh governance structures into the company. Like otherwise, we might see Kenya Power in the next few years going under.
So let's look at what might be happening, George. Let's look at that profitability trend, and we're going to look at that change in that profit margin. And George, Rich, if we could go to the next data set, the one that is indicating just the negative trend in terms of the margins. How do you jump? Well, yes, that's the one that we're talking about, George. So let's look at that data together, because if you look at it, George, just negative 459.2% in 2020. You go back to 2019, that change again was negative 92. So that is 367% change in their net income on the negative. When you have such a drastic change in your books, George, what does it indicate? Is it that you did one thing wrong?
I think, Elijah, just as my brother William put it,
yes,
Kenya Power is under capture of very powerful functionaries, especially in government. There's a group of individuals called, or corporates called, independent power producers. And I don't know how they get Kenya Power to sign in on contracts that are not sustainable, Elijah. The price at which Kenya Power procures power from these companies, and the price at which it has to roll it over to the market, there's a big mismatch in the two, yes, such that I buy power at, say, 10 shillings per kilowatt hour, and then sell it at 5 shillings per kilowatt hour. I cannot be in business when I'm doing that. And these contracts are structured in such a way that Kenya Power cannot pull out of them until expiry of a given period of time. And there's high chances that they're likely to be renewed, given the positions that some of these companies hold in the political side, and especially in the company. So Kenya Power, it's about just managing the governance. The market is there, Elijah, and it is a monopoly. So it begs the question: why would Kenya Power be making losses or not able to return reasonable profits to its shareholders? It boils down to management of some of these issues. There's a thing that affects Kenya Power very seriously, and that is what we call the FX fluctuation. Some of these independent power producers, the contracts are signed in dollars, but remember, Kenya Power collects its revenues in Kenya shillings.
Yes.
So it begs the question: why would I still be forced to pay for FX fluctuations to a company where I'm the one who is procuring services from them, or procuring power from them? There's a lot of mismatch between some of these things, and that mirrors what happened to Kenya Airways between Kenya Airways and KLM before. Remember what the contracts that Kenya Airways had with KLM. It mirrors the same, the same, where you have a contract with somebody who doesn't care whether you're making profit or not. What they're interested in is how much they're going to get from the contract that you've signed with them. So, in my opinion, Elijah, KPLC has to be restructured, and it has to be restructured all the way from the governance level. The middle level and even the lower level management have no problem.
Yes.
The top has a very big problem. There are functionaries who are hell-bent on milking Kenya Power dry, and they're not interested whether Kenya Power survives or not. Theirs is to get the maximum amount that they can get within the shortest period of time.
Pretty much. All right, Onyamba Ramogi, let's clear that conversation for Kenya Power. Now, let's put into context on exactly what is happening in a company. You say George is just clear on that it needs to be restructured. Fine. But then Odhiambo Ramogi, that restructuring has sort of gone on in that company. You sort of have fresh faces on that board. Remember, this board that we're running under is a new board, Odhiambo Ramogi. The CEO who just quit, Bernard Ngugi, and he was very strong on that. He said, I quit for personal reasons. That was a new CEO. He didn't clear. He was just on that helm for what? 3 years. So even when we're talking about the restructuring that we can do right now, bring in fresh faces to try and run that company, is it not hard to understand on what sort of restructuring is going to help that company, Odhiambo Ramogi?
No, I agree with George that yes, there's need for restructuring, but I think just restructuring will not do it.
Yes.
That has been attempted before. I think there is need for us to ask ourselves, how do we release a company or a corporate company entity from the grasp of state capture that he has described? How do we get Kenya Power out of the contracts that it signed for independent power producing? Because that is the first line of defense for Kenya Power.
Yes.
That they have to ensure that their supply lines are within their interest, because their supply lines right now are not within their interest. And so I think that is the first line of interest, the first line for them. Then the second line would be, how do they then release themselves from the people who have interests within the board? And that restructuring then is not just about changing of faces, but also changing of interests. I think this is where institutions like CMA should come to play, because Kenya Power is a listed company. And then they ask themselves, who is seconding the directors to Kenya Power, and in what way are these directors helping the regular shareholder? Because if these directors are merely there to represent key interests at the expense of every shareholder, then I think we have a big problem. And CMA should be able to investigate that and get into it. And so it's not just a change of faces, it's also significantly a change of structure. And I think that's what George meant by privatizing Kenya Power. Because Kenya Power is a private company by name and by law and by practice. It is a private company.
Yes.
But government shares there are many. And so the government still has significant interest, which the interest is supposed to represent Wanjiku, but it's not happening. And so that then needs to be restructured so that the government can release some of its shares, reduce its influence significantly, maybe to under 20%, so that Kenya Power can be free to operate properly.
Pretty much. Now, gentlemen, let's move on to the next one, where the control of budgets and Commissioner on Revenue Allocation has faulted both the Parliament and National Treasury for the current debt crisis following the government's shift from borrowing cheaper long-term loans to short-term and more expensive loans. Now, the two offices are now recommending renegotiations of debt repayment agreements and slowing down of borrowing that has seen the government use 64% of its tax revenue collected to service foreign debts. Metropole TV's Vincent Odhiambo starts us this morning.
In March this year, after thorough assessment, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, rated Kenya's public debt as sustainable, but warned that the country was at high risk of debt distress. As at the end of June this year, Kenya's gross public debt stood at 7.7 trillion shillings, a figure that has been attributed to the country's shift from borrowing cheaper long-term bilateral and multilateral loans to more expensive and short-term commercial loans. In 2010, Kenya's commercial debt was at 0%. 11 years later, commercial loans make up 30% of Kenya's total debts. The country's debt pressure has forced the government to use 64% of its tax revenue collected to service debts.
Debt service crowds out other important expenditure. And again, remember, honorable members, COVID comes, and it's a crisis that comes when you're already vulnerable, and then our revenues contract. but our debt service payments can't contract.
Presenting before the Senate Committee on Finance and Budget, Controller of Budget Dr. Margaret Nyakango questioned why the government had paid over 1.7 billion shillings on commitment fees on loans that had not been used.
Each loan agreement, each credible loan agreement must have an exit clause. Now that exit clause is usually crafted in favor of the lender, but that doesn't mean it cannot be done. Indeed, it would be better that we bite the bullet at once and make that payment that can stop us from paying forever. Because as long as we don't draw down that loan, Chairman, we must continue paying the commitment fees.
Due to debt pressure, county governments have also been put on the spotlight for borrowing money to facilitate county obligations, while others operate multiple accounts that give room for misappropriation.
We should encourage counties to increase their source revenue by whatever means, if it is the technology, if it is the staffing, whatever it is that will help them raise their own source revenues. That is what will get us out of this trap, not more borrowing.
Dr. Nyakango further revealed that the National Treasury has now resorted to borrowing from the domestic market to repay foreign debts. To slow the government's borrowing, the Senate Committee on Finance and Budget has promised to push for an amendment bill on the COB Act that will give more powers to the Controller of Budget to monitor the country's public debt. For Metropole TV, I'm Vincent Odhiambo.
That's how bad it is. In fact, you can hear how very much the Controller of Budget is worried that we're even borrowing domestically to pay our external debt. We're going to put these figures and arguments into proper context once we come from this break. But shortly, let's also now tell you exactly where we are. In terms of where we are in terms of debt servicing, we are at 1.17 trillion in terms of debt servicing. Let's talk about where we are in terms of how we use our monies then to pay this debt. Now you have to know that 88% of the consolidated service goes to debt servicing. Now, for those who don't know, then let's talk about the ordinary revenue. It is 66% of ordinary revenues collected by the Kenya Revenue Authority that go into servicing of debt right now, as of this financial year, just leaving 34% of that revenue to run government services, and this from 44% in 2019-2020. So just a 22% jump within that area. But then on a lighter note, then you will say with the recent rebasing of the economy, then our debt to GDP ratio has fallen from 70% to 55%, meaning we can go for more money, to be exact, 990 billion or more in debt. Let's take a short break. Once we come back, we talk about these figures and numbers with George and Odhiambo right here on a Business AM. Good morning.